I'm going to start off real quick just thanking y'all for coming. For those at the 9 o'clock service, I was a little worried about what Doug was saying in his sermon, whether coming to the master plan or the master's plan that he is putting on for the gospel Bible study. But as I told, I've got Randy Holmes and Scott Kyle from Glave Holmes who have been leading us through this master planning process. As I came in, I said that the master plan is actually part of the master's plan, I believe. Well, in the interest of time, thank you all again for coming. We started this almost 3 years ago, pre-pandemic, and then of course the world shut down. We had, through that time in 2020, we had gotten two surveys done that we had sent out to the congregation, and we were in the process, and we got into June, July of 2020, and we just decided, the vestry decided it just didn't make sense as we were shut down and we were trying to figure everything out like the rest of the country and the rest of the world. Back in this last July, we resurrected the process again, and we're here now. And from this presentation, it's taken the information from 2 years ago. We did another survey to kind of verify what we had done before. That was done in August. And then we've had an enhanced master plan committee who has been working with Glave Holmes to come up with what you're going to see being presented. From here, there'll be a presentation and a kind of a final master plan presented to the vestry next month. And then the plan is the vestry would vote on that at its January meeting. Primarily 4 goals that we are trying to achieve through this process right now. One is ADA accessibility. Another is the most efficient space usage between Gibson Hall, the parish house, and here at Misha House. We're looking at how is our green space being used between the courtyard and what else could we do to provide more green space, not only necessarily for us, but for the community at large. And then the final main piece is to renovate the parish house. It's been, as my understanding, 60 years since that has been renovated, and it's showing its age. So what I would ask is that everybody hold questions off to the end. There will be enough time. And I think that, of course, many of your questions might be answered through the course of their presentation. So with that, Randy and Scott.
Good morning. We are thrilled to be with you in this journey of trying to discover the next chapter of the facilities, the physical facilities here at St. James's, and it's just been an honor for us to be on this journey that did take a hiatus, as Harry talked about, but I think we're back on track and have had some really good progress. And so what we're going to do today is Scott's going to share with you just what is a master plan, just to kind of help us all have a framework, sort of a mental framework for what we've been doing and what a process is, so that we can all share that together. And then we're going to talk about some of the workshops that have taken place and give you a quick summary of what's come out of those workshops, working with, there have been 7 committees here that we've been working with throughout the process. So we'll share with you that. And then from that, we've just begun to do what we call charrette. Charrette's an architectural term that means intensive workshop. And the last workshop we did was starting to take all of this data that we've been collecting and ideas that we've heard about and the initiatives that Harry talked about. And we've started to bring them into concepts, sketches, ideas that begin to influence the way the facilities might be evolved going forward. And so we're going to share that with you, and then we'll try to leave time for questions and discussion. So, with that, Scott?
All right, can you hear me? Yep, okay. So just a quick reminder for those who haven't heard our spiel about what a master planning process is. I'll try to go through these really quickly, and again, we'll have some time at the end to answer questions or have discussion. So I think probably the first thing to ask is, why a master plan? A master plan is a strategic conceptual guide to long-range developments of a property and/or campus. So it creates this practical yet achievable, clear vision. A lot of times we call it a roadmap. Really, it's a way for the institution to have this book, or maybe Bible, if you will, for planning out that next 5, 10, 15 years, and using it as sort of guidelines for projects, for future projects. And that we've been following this, just as it shows here in four sort of phases. And the first one is looking at existing conditions and doing some programming, architectural programming, visioning, developing concepts, and then creating this master plan document at the end to use as the roadmap. And so we call this the 4 C's: collect, collaborate, conceptualize, and consolidate. And so that looks like this in a schedule. And the arrows that are sort of fanning out at the beginning, that's what we call that divergence period. So up through the collaboration period, we're really just casting a wide net and trying to get as much information as possible so that we can start to edit it, test it, feed it back to the committees to see what we think we heard is correct. And so that might be history of church, existing drawings. That also might be strategic plans. Through this process, it's called collect, but we're doing some collaborating really as we work through this as well. This shows you all a little bit about the types of things we've collected to date, and that includes the information, even in the workshops. That's still a collection period. But in the early phases here, we did develop this vision and goals for the actual master plan. And so Harry mentioned 4. We've added a little bit, or made this defined these a little bit differently. But basically, this is about creating unified identity, thinking outside the box, and creating a realignment of the program within the existing facilities. One of the most recent interviews is summarized here. This was through those 7 committees that Randy mentioned. So communications, technology, formation, worship, service, engagement, stewardship, and finance. And then there's the master plan committee as well. And so all the things in red here, these are ideas that really popped out to us that you'll see in the eventual master plan we're using to sort of steer some of those charrettes as well. In that charrette, it is part of that collaboration and conceptualizing phase as well. So that means things like, putting existing floor plans together and color coding them by type. That really helps to look at how space is being used, and we've done a lot of work in that. I won't show any of that here, but this will be in the master plan as well. That also includes, the program, the existing program in those spaces. There's a lot of square footage at the church, and so there's a lot we can actually look at reconceptualizing and reformatting. That's just an example of how we've been collaborating. We've been doing it in person a little bit more recently, but also via Zoom. And conceptualizing that phase, obviously is where we roll our sleeves up, and what Randy talked about a little bit. We'll review that. Randy's going to review some of that. I'll review some at the end here, and some of the ideas that we've come up with, concepts that we've come up with in the process. This final piece is consolidate or consolidation. That's where we'll try to focus. So this is that convergence period. We'll focus everything that we've learned and that you want to include going forward in this roadmap, and that will make its way into a bound, but also a PDF, electronic document for use by the church. There's also after that the implementation. So that's where we put together. This will also be in the master plan, but things like phasing of some of these ideas and concepts. So that might be 3 phases over 5 years each phase, and partly that relates to what the fundraising activities might need. Those chunks. What are those bite-sized chunks? There's the low-hanging fruit maybe, and what are each of those chunks for fundraising, and that's how that might be actually organized. So just quick notes, and Brandy, just jump in if you want to on these, but I'm going to try to just blow through some of these really quickly. But these are some of the exercises, just examples of some of the exercises that we worked on. Randy worked on this one.
One of the first that we worked on was what we call red dot, green dot. And this represents one of 3 panels of images talking about the exterior character of the church campus. How do we begin to unify the campus and give an overall look? And so our team, the representatives from various committees on a workshop with me, we went through and we gave the team members red dots if they thought this is something that wasn't inspiring, didn't really give us something that we felt like was relevant, and then green dot if you thought it was inspiring, if you thought it was something that did have relevance to St. James's. So the compilation of all that was this. Next slide. So what this represents is some of the ideas that came forward. Lighting the church, letting the church become an icon day and night was one of the things we thought might have a stronger presence in the neighborhood. And even doing that with some unique lighting components was something that was discussed in our group. As you know, there's been talk about trying to take advantage of Birch Street. Could we close Birch Street? And we'll report on that more in just a minute. But one of the ideas that came out was this notion of retractable bollards. The bollards that could go up and down, so that Birch Street could be closed for certain events and then open other times in an efficient manner, an easy manner. So that was an idea. Making the whole front of the church more welcoming is something that was talked about. Using landscape to enhance that, to strengthen that character, and using streetscaping are some of the ideas that we're going to talk about as we get into it.
And one of the exercises that Erica, who couldn't be with us today, she's another member of our team here. She's home with a sick baby, but was to look at what spaces needed to be dedicated. That's really important if you've got an existing facility, to see what spaces have the opportunity to serve multiple functions or serve 2 functions or whatever that might be. And so we created a list of the existing spaces and how they were allocated as either existing or shared, and then came up with a list of ideal allocations for either dedicated or shared spaces. And you can see some of the examples of that here. Another one my group worked on was sort of ranking spaces or needs for spaces, or spaces that they wanted to see implemented in some way. And so with all of the items that sort of are 1 through 5 here on that list on the left, you can see them with the dark colors behind them. Those were the ones that sort of rose to the top in terms of ranking. And we did get a real-time ranking with the cards that gave them a rank for each of those, the importance of each of those types of spaces. You can see like outdoor worship space as an example was highly ranked, and that's something that came up in a lot of our interviews and meetings. And then another exercise was about sort of before you get into this conceptual, more visual idea of concepts, was looking at how spaces are actually used, and if there's something missing from the spaces. So for the nursery, there was some issues about keeping infants separate from a little bit older children. I think it's basically 0 or 3 months to 18 months would be considered infant here. And then then there's kids 18 months to through 4 years, and so we came up with an idea of being actually able to divide the current space, because the current space is serving pretty well, but also an idea came up about a nursing room adjacent to the nursery space. So for a parent that's nursing, could still be part of the sermon. There could be a digital display in that room, and since it's being videotaped, they could still remain part of that. So things like that came up, as well as some other functional requirements. Same thing with music. Music's working pretty well, but there are needs for storage of sheet music, maybe more instrument storage, and then the idea of taking the restrooms away from other uses in the building that seem to cause problems with noise during recording. And so that's in one of our schemes for the floor plan, to look at a little rearrangement there. Then that gives more space for music for practice rooms and and sheet music storage, et cetera. Erica went through looking at some of the multi-purpose spaces and what spaces could be used for multi-purpose or are being used for multi-purpose, and what other uses could use that multi-purpose function. And then looking at office spaces, again, what could be shared office and what really needs to be individual offices, and where those could be located. So we'll look at that in a minute as well. We also looked at last time actually in the 2020 portion at some of the sustainability measures that we want to incorporate into our master plan as well. And so some of these items will make its way into there for folks to consider.
So as Harry touched on, as we moved into the final workshop, which was beginning to develop concepts and ideas, we began with the 4 key initiatives that sort of arose as we worked through some of the things that we were trying to accomplish. They were to, again, find more efficient use of space, as Harry articulated. The ADA access to the sanctuary was a key component that people felt needed to be addressed. The parish house renovation, it's time, and regardless of which use goes in that, we need to renovate that space. And then the idea of more outdoor space, more green space, particularly a columbarium and a extended or enlarged memorial garden were ideas that were felt to be worthy of consideration as we began to sketch. And so I was working with a team working on the site plan and the exterior of the building. And the sketch that we developed during the workshop involved a couple of key components. The idea that we could maybe relocate the playground over to this parking lot that's outside of Misha, right outside this. And the idea was, if we don't want to lose parking, which I know parking is a very, very important issue, then you could create an elevated platform that would allow access from this room to an outdoor multi-function area. You could have receptions outdoors. You could have, indoor-outdoor wedding events and things like that. But also part of that would be a playground, which would allow the playground from here to be relocated here. And we're going to talk about that when you get into the schemes of the idea that the Children's Center, of course, would be also located here, which might make more effective use of the spaces here in Misha House. So the Children's Center moves, the playground moves, and we get an outdoor reception space here. That could be at the ground level if we didn't want to go through the expense of an elevated platform, or we could do it as an elevated platform if we wanted to preserve parking. So those were some of the ideas that came out of the charrette. That would allow for the construction of a columbarium and an extended or enlarged memorial garden as a way of really taking this entire space and making it a wonderful meditation and outdoor sort of a special area. So the other idea was then we could close Birch Street was the first concept in this study, was to say, let's close Birch Street. We can create an outdoor gathering area, a playground that's for the community. The neighborhood could use it, as well as that could be the playground. If this doesn't work, then that could be the playground right off of Misha House. So these were the ideas that were floated, and we began to capture them in this sketch. So closing Birch Street. The other key component is this handicap ramp. The one thing that we wanted was a ramp that was basically connected to the front of the church, rather than making people feel like they had to go to the back of the church or something like that. We wanted it to have it as a part of the arrival, as a part of the kind of area where people come into the church. And so a drop-off area, a way to go up a ramp and enter to the narthex was something that was important, and we developed that in this sketch. So let me take you through some of the other ideas about site plan that were touched on, and then I'll go into what's happening with Birch Street. But safety and connectivity from the garage over to the sanctuary, those are some of the key factors that were part of the site plan discussion. And given the entire campus an identity, a sense that you're part of St. James's and St. James's is in the neighborhood, were important factors that we looked at. One of the ways to do that would be to use a kind of a reinforced datum. Datum just means line, a way of sort of identifying an edge to the entire campus. And that could be done, forgive me, that could be done with landscape, it could be done with paving. One of the ideas was to develop a more attractive or more identifiable paving in front of the sanctuary, and then allow that to be extended along the entire campus edge as a way of creating an identity. And that could be done with lots of different types of material, whether that's a bluestone paving or a concrete paving, and it could involve landscape, it could involve street furniture, things like that, that would give the campus identity and character. Also using light posts and banners as a way of saying I'm on St. James's campus, so something along these lines was talked about as a way of really enhancing the presence along Franklin Street. Using the trees that are there, the tree wells, and maybe uplighting them, giving that area a special touch of lighting at night, which tied to also lighting the church and finding ways to maybe make it more of an icon, particularly in the evening, with both lighting the exterior of the church. You have an amazingly beautiful architectural building. And I think it could really be enhanced in the evening and become part of a neighborhood, but also have a presence in the neighborhood through lighting. And one of the other ideas is to take the stained glass and actually light it from behind. This is a church, where was this?
Grace Episcopal in San Francisco.
In San Francisco, this church took their rose window and lit it from behind, and made it basically an expression of art in the evening. And you all have some amazing stained glass which could do the same just by creating a clever way to light it in the evening. And then, sort of fun ideas like what if we put into the paving some special paving that, is either has light in it or has color in it or does something to begin to say I am on St. James's campus as people walk up and down Franklin Street. So those ideas led to that concept. But Birch Street, after the charrette, we met with the West Avenue Neighborhood Association, and we met with the city, both of whom said we don't think closing Birch Street is a very valid idea, at least not permanently. No surprise. So what could we do? So we came up with an idea of what if we just took some parking off of Birch Street? That would allow us to get the handicap ramp in and even have an area for drop-off, and we could still have parking on the southern end. We could get 3 cars on, and that would allow Birch Street to remain open, with the idea that on certain events you might close it, but that might work. Well, we floated that idea, and no surprise, a lot of people weren't happy with the idea of giving up 3 parking spaces. So that became problematic. And so then we said, well, what if we made a piazza? What if we came up with the idea of a paved area on the southern end where it widens because of the way Misha House steps back, and we could create all the parking. There's 6 spaces on Birch now. We could put 6 parking spaces on the southern end and create a unique paving that would allow us to get the handicap ramp in, still have a way to drop off, to bring people in to drop off, create a unique identity to the campus overall, and have a place that not only can handle the cars on a regular basis, but on special events we could close it and get a 20 by 40 tent. So we could do outdoor events. So if we wanted to do a special celebration, maybe a wedding event, things like that, with permission, you could still close Birch Street and have greater safety and have a space that was useful for gatherings or for events like that. And this works whether the playground stays or moves. In other words, this was not trying to be a playground, and so whether the playground stays here, whether the playground moves, didn't change that scheme. So we started to work on developing that scheme, and here's just a rough rendering of what that might look like. You can see how the handicap ramp graciously brings you up. We take one of the existing windows, the one that's in the narthex, and turn it into a door and allow people to enter into the narthex. As people come up the stairs, others can come up the ramp, and it works all to the same location. And then we can create some paving in Birch Street that allows Birch Street to accommodate 6 cars. But when these cars are not there, you could still have bollards, whether they're retractable or whether you bring them in or however you do it. You could still close Birch Street, put a tent in here, and create special events when needed. So that's some of the things that have been developed on the site.
Thanks, Randy. So I'll quickly go through some of the ideas of the inside of the building. So this is about organizing those spaces inside the building as the buildings for the most part exist now. So just a little bit of a summary of what is existing right now. And we can look at a plan in a moment as well. But at the basement level, so if we're just taking these, quote, 3 buildings, Sanctuary and Gibson as one, and Misha House and Parish House. The basements right now are multi-purpose room for Misha, Parkinson assembly room, kitchen in the Sanctuary and Gibson areas. And then in the Parish House, there's the catacombs meeting space. And then first floor, on these 3 spaces, so I'll just stick with Misha. That's a meeting space. That's where we are right now, obviously, and the parlors, and that's really seen as staying as is, working very well as it is. The second floor, right now there's Sunday school classrooms as well as offices, and same on the third floor, the youth Sunday school classrooms and offices. In the Sanctuary and in Gibson, on the first floor, there's the Sanctuary, obviously the nursery space. Children's Center, and conference rooms, and second floor is a music program. And the Parish House, first floor and through third floor are all staff offices currently. So we'll look at the sort of the first, second, third floors, because those are, I think, where most of the programmatic changes would be occurring in our concept ideas. And again, these are just concepts, and so we're something to give the church really options to look at in the future and how these spaces might be reorganized. So what we saw is really working pretty well. The multipurpose space of Misha and then the catacombs and parish are being used pretty regularly. They need some updating maybe, but for the most part, as multi-purpose spaces, they're functioning really well. We know choir even uses them for some of their breakout practicing. And so we're just, giving some ideas, some eye candy about what those spaces might look like if they were renovated in some way. I know we've talked about third church spaces, third meeting spaces. Maybe some of those spaces, one of the spaces could have a little bit more raw look to it, so an open ceiling, but comfortable seating. Maybe like on the top left here, there could be movable partitions that allow the spaces to be broken into 2 spaces when they're needed for 2 different events. Like in the lower middle here, which I guess I could use this, sorry. Things like these marker boards or movable marker boards that could be moved around in the space to help subdivide some of those spaces for different uses. So a lot of options there. When you have multi-purpose spaces, there's really a lot more options, obviously. And so since they are working pretty well right now, that's really a lot about furniture and just some of the finishes. So just to give you a brief kind of summary, I guess, of the 4 schemes that we've come up with for concept ideas for the interior of the spaces. So for scheme 1, we'll show each of these briefly, but scheme 1 shows staff offices all moving to Misha into this building above the first floor. Sunday school on the 3rd floor of Misha and again in the basement as it is now for youth. And then the Children's Center expanding from Gibson, where it is right now, into the Parish House. Scheme 2 looks at staff offices, again, being in Misha, Sunday School, and the Children's Center, both being in a renovated Parish House. And probably a renovation, when we say renovation, it's probably more like what happened here, which is a a gutting of it and reforming the inside of the building to make better use of the spaces and so that they're not so broken up as they are now. What's nice about that idea is that it puts those two children's functions together, so there could be some overlap since they don't operate at the same time. So there could be some shared spaces with that. Then in the third scheme, the Children's Center and Sunday School are both in Misha House. So that would mean Children's Center moved there. And then the staff offices get developed into Gibson. And then finally, the fourth scheme, Children's Center, I think the idea here is if it ended up expanding, if the Children's Center wanted to or needed to expand, it would be located on 2 floors of Misha. The Sunday School would be in a renovated parish house, and then the staff offices would be in Gibson. So just a word about this. So the program at the top is the first thing that I showed you all. It's the existing function. If you can read that, but I'll talk through it briefly. And then the proposed concept is this program here. So as I mentioned before, the basement spaces basically stay the same. And I think I'll just hit the main changes here. So the Children's Center, as you can see here, and Parish House. So that's shown with this orange profile here. Orange border, staff offices, and Misha. So that it incorporates them, all of the spaces in Misha on the second floor, and then providing this sort of gathering open space in the middle for collaboration, and then the Sunday School on the third floor in Misha. And this would be using all of the rooms up there to make use for Sunday schools. It's currently on 2 floors right now. Scheme 2, Parish House gets the Children's Center. So again, you can see that here. The Misha gets staff offices again, and then the sanctuary area Gibson gets keeps the Sunday School, as well as the potential for a 3rd floor apartment in this scheme. So this would mean, since the offices are moving, that 3rd floor could be a rentable or parish use apartment or living space. And then there's another idea of 3rd floor of Misha in this scheme of being something for partner programs, really multi-use, multi-purpose spaces on the 3rd floor. Third scheme, the big changes here again are sanctuary. So Gibson gets staff offices, so conference rooms. The music program stays there, of course. And then in Misha, that's where Children's Center moves with Sunday School above that. So this is Children's Center, and this is the Sunday School. And then the fourth one was basically a variation of that, which was where the Misha the 3rd floor would get Children's Center if that needed to be a larger program, and the other programs stay the same.
So, as we wrap up, we are meeting tomorrow with the West Avenue Neighborhood Association to continue discussions about the possibility of doing something like this with Birch Street. And we are going to be continuing to work with Harry and the Master Plan Committee to begin to coalesce these schemes to determine sort of the pros and cons of these schemes, to be able to give the vestry and the church some options to consider and look at as they think about going forward. With that, I think we will open up to questions. Yes, ma'am.
Is it my understanding then if we lose this parking lot, pretty much unless we build a whole big thing over it? We already have a lot of parking issues here. Every time we have something special, we overflow the parking deck. We used to have extra parking over there, which is not available anymore. And I'm very concerned. I mean, today, when I got here 10 minutes before church, I could not park in the surface lot.
Sure.
Fortunately, there still was a handicap space available across the street. So help me understand about the park.
Well, the parking is a key concern, as we understand. And, you know, we know that the deck helps a lot, but it doesn't answer all the issues. So only if the Children's Center moves into this building do we have the need for a playground, somewhere for the children to go outside. And it would be difficult to go from this building over to the existing playground. It's conceivable, but it's difficult. And so the idea of doing something, but if that happened, then I think the preferred option would be to have an elevated playground so that there wouldn't be any loss of parking. The elevated playground, I know, is an expense, but it would provide outdoor space not only for children, but could also provide outdoor space for adults. If that was deemed not desirable, then it may make the scheme of putting the Children's Center in this building less desirable, but that would be to preserve parking. So in many of the schemes, there is no change to the parking here, or no change to the parking overall. There would be no reduction of parking. So on several of these schemes, I think parking is preserved as is.
Randy, let me also, Linda, and understand that that is shared parking with Beth Hava. So we have not talked to Beth Hava about any of this yet. It's just a concept.
Other questions? Thank you.
Neighborhood parking lot.
I just wanted to make a point. When we were going over these designs with you, one of the things that was shocking to some of us in the meetings was the unused space, like as it exists. And you glazed over something that caught my ear about shared space, maybe like rented or partner space. Do you remember that meeting? Can you talk a little bit about that? I think that's really an attractive option.
It is, and yeah.
The question is about shared space, so those listening virtually can.
Yeah, and we, you know, I'll just flip to at least one of these, just to remind, let's see, we're gonna go, on the wrong way? Yep. So, let me go to this last one and I'll show you the, sorry. There we go. So, for example, we showed, I think on Misha maybe, an example of, we called it community partners on here. So, you know, this potentially could be a space like that. And so, you know, in having, you know, discussions with other folks on committees, maybe there may be some sensitivity about what community partners is and who gets to have that space, you know. So whether that's called a multi-purpose space or a, you know, rentable kind of community partner space, I think that's still in play, and we'll probably have more discussions about that. But the idea of that was organizations, and what we heard from our interviews with you all is that some of your partner organizations, you know, don't have very solid lease agreements. You know, they're working on a shoestring budget, and so they're moving spaces constantly. And so some of those folks might benefit from a space like a community partner space. There may be just an office. It might be a couple offices or a larger space. And so we try to integrate that into our thinking. What spaces could actually, you know, serve that purpose? I mean, it could be a renovated parish house that could do that as well. So those are still in play here. So is there something, maybe I could ask you, is there some other, something we're missing with that?
No, that was it.
Okay.
I think it's important to remember that almost the entirety of this building is empty Monday through Friday.
Yep.
That's sort of
Yep.
how we-
Definitely.
Yeah, I guess that was my question. If you're saying there's space for communities to come in, you have an apartment option here. So clearly you could identify spaces that are not used enough.
Yep.
Or,
Yes.
and
Correct.
You just mentioned, you know, above us is not used most of the week. Are there other
That's right.
spaces that are underused or not used enough
I-
based on the original?
Yeah, I mean, you can think of, I mean, there's probably, the multipurpose spaces seem to be used pretty well now. The basement spaces, those are used throughout the week a little bit for different programs. You know, there's an AA meeting in some of the spaces and other
There's
types
still
of, there's
opportunity for more
Boy
use.
Scouts, but yeah, there certainly is, you know, if we looked at the schedule for all of these things, and we did do a diagram, don't have it in this presentation, that showed the schedule of all of the church spaces throughout the week and on Sunday, and obviously on Sunday, almost everything's used, but, you know, except for the Children's Center, right? So, there are spaces in every building on almost every floor that have availability during the weekdays. And we have identified those in a separate diagram. But I think there definitely are options, and those are things that need to be looked at. You know, it's not just that providing a service to other folks and other organizations like-minded, but also just energy cost and use, because you're heating and cooling all of these spaces that are empty all week long, and someone could benefit from them, and maybe you could offset that with some kind of rentals as well. So I think there's,
Question back. Do you have a question?
what do y'all, yeah.
Question was about the shared space actually and about the AA meetings, so I was just curious. And is that, the basement is part of this renovation?
Yes, it would be. Yeah, but I think the point with the basement spaces, but they're working pretty well the way they are now. They just need to be updated, and furniture could be a big part of that solution.
Oh, we have a question over here and then a question back there.
Francis, can you stand up so we can hear you?
Did you look into any schedules pre-COVID? Because these buildings were used a lot more pre-COVID.
Yes, yeah, and I think,
Had more ministries.
I think that's right. I mean, our schedules do come from the pre-COVID period, really, and we definitely have discussions about what's getting filled back in, and you know, some of the programs really get, you know, it's kind of a hard time to look at it. This is a really hard time to look at some of the use at this point still right now, as some of these programs start coming back into being again. So, you know, out of the, I forget the total number of square feet, but yes, the spaces are being used, but not for the most part during the week, not very much. Yeah, certainly on Sunday.
I was the
Yeah.
director of research and development for our last, when we had our last meeting.
Mhm.
So, we
Yeah, I mean, the point is that,
used this space when we built this.
yeah, this space gets used a lot, obviously, but, you know, I think in looking at it overall, you know, if it's used a lot, that doesn't mean 100%. It probably means something more like 20% or 25% from what we looked at in the schedules that were given to us. And so I think part of our goal is to look at how the spaces could be better used, right? So, and looking at schedules and the uses of rooms and whether they could be used for two functions or one function, will certainly, and if there's more information to be added here, there's certainly a way to provide that, you know, you know, and I will show you at the end of this, we'll show you how to contact Carrie for that.
Just to give some history and perspective on the lack of shared space, part of when this was being planned, part of the plan was to create space dedicated just to St. James's Sunday school classrooms, so that it wouldn't be shared with, at least pre-Bishop House, being shared with the Children's
also renovating the parish house. As far as Mission House goes, we were all really excited when this space was made. It's an amazing space, our dedicated children's space. This is our fellowship hall. And the thought of putting our kids over somewhere, I just don't think the flow is gonna work. Now kids come down to the fellowship hall, their parents are going to Sunday school here. This is our fellowship space. And to hear about all the rejiggering of offices, I've gone to Bible studies upstairs, I've been in fellowship groups upstairs, I've gone to book studies upstairs. This building is used for fellowship. In my mind, it's the fellowship part of St. James's. So I just wanted to offer that observation. And also, as a last item I really want to mention is, I'm really troubled by all the bells and whistles here. We are in a hurting world. We should be seeking the master's plan here. And the thought of all this stuff going on, all the little bells and whistles, I know the ADA and the parish house are important, but for us to turn inside right now and to be focusing so much energy on all these bells and whistles, when we've just gotten through COVID, and this is really a hurting world, there are a lot of hurting people still within St. James's. I think we need to really have a lot of prayer about this and meet together as a community. I think we need to have more meetings about this. I respect the vestry, I respect the committee that's been working on this, but these are huge changes. And I would hate to see them happen without us all praying together, speaking respectfully about what should be done, and most of all, focusing on what God would have us do. And I don't mean to sound sanctimonious, but I really feel this very strongly.
Thank you.
Please help me understand how this is going to put more people in the pews.
Well, an overlay to all of this, and with respect for what you said about bells and whistles, the idea is that we have to make an attractive experience for newcomers. And what ways can we make the newcomer feel more welcome was a key part of what was discussed among the committees and among the ideas that were expressed, is to reach, there's a diverse neighborhood around us, and so how do we reach that diverse neighborhood and make them feel welcome when they come for the first time, whether that's a Sunday morning, whether that's an event down in one of the multi-purpose rooms or in this space. What are some things that can say, we're really glad you're here, in the way the building signage is dealt with, the ADA accessibility, some of the bells and whistles were not to just be bells and whistles, but to really enhance a sense of welcome to people who might have some concerns about coming to a church, who might haven't been to a church in a while.
Is the meeting tomorrow night with the West Avenue Association as a whole, or just the leadership?
Harry, who's going to be there?
There are three people, Avon, that were designated from the membership meeting the other night that we're meeting with.
So my dreaded question is, what happens if they are absolutely adamant, they or the city? What on earth are we gonna do? Good idea.
We'll continue to try to graciously chip away at it a step at a time in making, I think the key improvement that we're seeking is the ADA accessibility. And so if we can just get that, that's one step towards a hopeful softening of the neighborhood and the city towards the idea that Birch Street can be used both collectively for the neighborhood, but also for the church, and that the church's needs also are a part of what is being in the neighborhood, and to get them to really help us to continue to make improvements. And then you could maybe improve the crosswalk, maybe improve the pavement, maybe create the courtyard. That's the hope.
Can
So
the
Linda,
West Avenue Association's approval,
Melinda, if it doesn't, over here, if it doesn't work, if we can't do that either because of West Avenue or because of the city, then we're gonna have to look at Plan B. And Plan B right now, as you know, going through the courtyard and into Gibson Hall and around, it's really going around your elbow to get to your nose, right?
terrible.
So,
Just don't come.
exactly.
What about a lift right there with steps?
And, and then you have, and how, no, I don't mean to pick on you, but you know, trying to get up the stairs and whatnot in the front is terrible. Plan B right now that we have talked about is actually building a ramp against Gibson Hall on the backside of the courtyard to go into the back way right here. And short of that, there really is no other alternative. And so, and that's not a good alternative either, right there. So we'll just have to.
Harry, can I add one thing about the questions? You know, if the two things that were problems with the city and with West Avenue were losing parking spaces and closing of the road because it's a right of way for utilities. So if we can handle both of those, which we have with the scheme that Randy showed, we're keeping 6 parking spaces and we're not closing the road unless by special use, then there shouldn't be the opposition to it. Now, we do have alternate plans. The handicapped lift idea, we've kind of shot down because every project that we do where we've got a lift, we're reminded, or think that the owner wants a lift, we're reminded that we don't want to make an event out of someone coming in a wheelchair and getting into the building. It creates an event, and they're coming, everybody's watching them. This is a much more human way to get the person in there. So it's an alternative, but it's not. We don't think it's a great alternative.
Did you have a comment?
Bill?
My name is Bill Smith, and I'm relatively new, so my question may be easily answered, but probably more by the best way. I'd like to congratulate you on the planning process that you have, but after all, it's a planning process for the physical space of the church. Now, the church exists in at least 2 more spaces, which is the social space and the spiritual space. And I just wondered whether Wesley had processes of similar quality for addressing the, and I think this addresses some of the questions which are asked over here. You know, which is, are there similar plans to address the social space and the spiritual space?
It's a good question, Bill. Harry, you want to